Welcome all. I'm Margaret Cooley from Woolman Hill Retreat Center in Deerfield, Massachusetts, and we're delighted to have everyone with us. Particularly grateful for Jen and Beacon Hill Friends House walking with us, and Peter Blood Patterson for beginning us on this journey, all of us. And we're delighted to have Lynette Davis here as the presenter, and with her elder Regina Renee, who some of you may recognize. And Carla Krull will be our reader, all of them part of Ujima Friends Peace Center, and it feels great to have that presence in our midst. And we welcome Dorothy Henderson as our elder again for Peter and for all of us. We welcome each of you, whatever your spiritual languages are, whatever your relationship with the Bible, whatever your relationship with Quakerism and with the Spirit, you're welcome here with us. We also want to welcome the land around us and the earth that gives us our sustenance, and particularly acknowledge that the land that's now where Woolman Hill is was first, as far as we know, first stewarded by Masha Lisk, a Pecumtuck woman and her family who fished and hunted and farmed there. They were unjustly removed by English settlers colonizing the space and removed from their care and connection to their homeland. Your land that you are now on may have similar stories, and we want to acknowledge that colonization has continued in those physical spaces as well as virtual and other ways. So we just recognize that much work is still needed for our restoring of right relationship with both the earth and land, and with many Native peoples still living among us. We want to call in right now the ancestors of the land and the ancestors of spirituality that we bring, each of us, from wherever we've come from. And I want to bring in Woolman Hill land with a few images from the recent week. First, a moment during the week that I sat right outside the office. Some of you may be able to picture the office. And it was a moment of quiet after a day of construction. This quiet had sort of settled onto the land. And as I sat there, I noticed that in a puddle right across the lane, there was an indigo bunting having a bird bath. And there were phlox blooming in the fields, and a bulldozer sitting close by with a bluebird that continued to land on the bulldozer periodically until I realized that it was building a nest on the bulldozer. And I'll bring an image from midweek worship when we were sitting outside on the grass near the meeting house with a wonderful breeze that blew tiny, tiny blossoms just showering over all of us. So I bring us all into that presence of spirit through this next hour and a half or so.
Alone in a room, it's just me and you. I feel so lost, 'cause I don't know what to do. Now what if I choose the wrong thing to do? I'm so afraid of disappointing you. So I need to talk to you and ask you for your guidance, especially today when my life is so cloudy. Guide me until I'm sure I
spirit, no choreography for me.
Wow, what a beginning. Okay, well, why don't you just take a couple minutes to let us know a little bit about your personal journey with this little book we've got.
Yeah. So my journey is quite economical and eclectic, much like me. I grew up in the church, actually. I've gone to church since I was a little girl, and the Bible was always something that was very much in the forefront of my life. As a matter of fact, I would say that my mom was very much so a Bible thumping Baptist. If there was anything she had to say, she had a Bible verse to back it, which I have learned is very Baptist in itself. My mom was very involved in the church, and so we went to Bible study, we went to vacation Bible school, and we had a Bible bookstore up the street from us. And so we lived there. And at that time, VeggieTales was like the hot cartoon. And so I watched VeggieTales all the time with my mom while she went shopping around for like Bible cases. And like, even still to this day, like the belly button song from VeggieTales is like still playing in my head. So I have quite a history with it. Interestingly enough, as I have traveled to different denominations and been around different people, my background, besides my mom's going to a Baptist church, my grandmother was Holiness Pentecostal, my family's Methodist. I went to Catholic school. So I had a lot of different diverse interpretations of the Bible. And around the time when I decided to leave the church, I was very angry at the church, not so much God, but just very angry with the church. And I was like, you know what, you could take your Bible and like throw it somewhere, because I don't want to have anything to do with your Bible and your interpretations of your Bible. And so I left everything that I had been raised with all the way behind. And I did not open the Bible. Even when I came to Quakerism in 2016, I didn't want to open the Bible. When they offered Bible study lessons, I was like, nope, I don't want to have anything to do with the Bible. Interestingly enough, for me, what changed was I ended up having a mystical experience in the wilderness of my life, which actually brought me into wanting to actually take my going to Quaker meetings more seriously. And that's when I discerned a call to go to seminary and a call to religious life as a sister, which was odd to me because I was like, God, I'm not Catholic. How's this going to work? But God is very funny. The God of my understanding is very funny. And so I picked up a Bible because that's what seminarians should do. They should actually read the Bible. And so I picked up a Bible to prepare myself for school, and I have not put it down since. So as I grew my relationship with the sisters more in praying daily office, I've come to look at the Bible in a different way. And I most experienced the Bible in a dream state like Joseph, and through song and dance. So all the things that I threw out before, I'm reclaiming them with a new understanding through the arts. And so that's how I am looking at the Bible now. How can I feel the words that are written here? How do they apply to my life? And how can I reimagine them? So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. So it'd be really nice if you could just take a few minutes to share why God placed this particular psalm, these verses in your heart to share with us, or to invite us to share with you, I guess, today.
Yeah, so I've been sitting with Psalm 139. Specifically, I've been mostly doing Lectio Divina to verses 1 through 12. And then I kicked in for 23 and 24 later. So it's actually a part of my daily office prayer. It usually comes up once a week. But before I even got into that, I was telling my spiritual director, a sister with the Felician sisters, that I wanted to increase my Lectio Divina practice. And so one of the first books that she gave me, knowing who I am, which I struggle with my self-worth a lot. And so she sent me Psalm 139. Now I knew about Psalm 39, but I only knew the King James version of it and through a gospel song. So I was like, I have never seen this verse before ever in my life. And so I read different interpretations of it, and I was like, oh, that's that song. It didn't click in that, oh, that's a Bible verse in the Bible book. It was like, oh, I know that song. So when she gave that to me, I thought it was really interesting that when I started seminary, we were assigned to write our spiritual autobiographies. And one of the reading assignments happened to also be Psalm 139. It was a couple of them. It was like, pick your choice. And I was like, well, my spiritual director assigned me this one. And of the choices that we have, here's that one again. And then my book, my common prayer book, my daily office book came in the mail, and it was a part of the lessons. I was like, okay, that's 3 times. 3 is a magic number for me. So maybe I should pay attention to this because it seems to be coming back up in my life. Now, here's an interesting story. As I mentioned before, dreams are very important to me. I've always felt as though I had a gift of dreams because I can remember most of my dreams when I wake up. And so I have some dreams that are very mysterious and some dreams that feel like they're very that they're full of message for me. And so I happened to have a dream where I was being my usual quirky, all over the place self, and I was kind of freaking out, and a mysterious companion came up, and I'm all like, what am I doing? Fumbling mess. And the companion's just sitting there like, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're going to go now. I look a mess and we're just going to go. I'm going to be all the way oddball out. And so we go to this destination mysteriously because it's a dream. And of course, I am an odd person now. I have yellow on and everybody else has blue one. And so I sit down with my companion and I'm like, great, I'm the weird person here. And then I look around and I notice there's one person that has orange on, one person that has purple on, and we're all in this sea of blue. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not the only odd person, but I'm still an odd person. And so I start freaking out again. And my companion's sitting there like with a paper. I don't know where the paper came from, but they're sitting there with a paper. And I'm like, oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. I'm acting all kinds of, idiosyncratic and maybe a little bit neurotic. And finally I huff and I look at the companion and I'm like, this person thinks I'm nuts. They're going to leave me. They're obviously going to leave me. And they're sitting there like, are you done yet? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm looking at this companion and I'm like, you're still here with me? Why? Like, you see me at like my absolute worst as I'm freaking out about nonsense. And this is me on a better day, And it dawned on me, you see me and you understand me. Wow. So that's what unconditional love is. For you to see me and understand me and still stay by my side, still companion me, still desire me, not as an afterthought or out of grudging acceptance, but full-blown true love. And there was something very, very beautiful about that as I sat and thought about how Psalm 139 talks about this omnipresent God, this omnipresent force that hems me in and places their hand upon me when I am all over the place, feeling like I don't belong, feeling like I want to run from myself, feeling like I want to crawl out of my skin, to be pulled back and said, to hear, I love you, I search you, I know you, you're mine, beautiful, wonderful, you're mine. And the humble response of going, yes, I want to accept your desire. So please search me some more. And if there's anything that disconnects me from you, if there's anything at all that takes away this unity, this mystical, beautiful relationship between us, then show me how to let that out of the way so that we can stay connected, so that we can stay as one.
Oh Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, oh Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the furthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me and the light around me becomes night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me, know my thought. See if there is any wicked way in me and lead me in the way everlasting.
Okay, so basically the most sort of generic question is really, what is God? What is Spirit? What is Christ speaking into your heart right now as you have watched Lynette dance, as you have heard Lynette talk about this passage very eloquently, and as you heard the words of the psalmist? And the other thing you could reflect on if you want is, what was it like to see someone dancing? Maybe probably most of us haven't seen this before, sacred dance in this way. And so how did that perhaps touch you as well?
Welcome back, friends.
So you think we're all pretty much out, Jen?
We are all out.
Okay. So before we open it up, which we will in a minute, for either sharing or questions, Lynette, I'm wondering if there's anything that you kind of was rolling around in your heart that you didn't have a chance to say before.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to add on. So there's two things that I wanted to say. I was trying to be mindful of the time. There were two aspects of Psalm 139 that clicked for me. The one aspect of being somebody who struggles with self-worth and feeling completely and unconditionally loved, seen, heard, and understood. But there's also an aspect of thinking that that's what you want from actual people in real life. And finding that when you encounter somebody who looks at you and it seems as though they see into your soul, it actually makes us very uncomfortable. it's kind of like, oh, wait, they're seeing me. They're seeing my flaws. They're seeing the sides of me that are shadow that I don't want you to necessarily see because it's not integrated within me yet. And so I understood the other aspect of so many different interpretations of 139, where it's kind of like, wait, God is stalking me. like, why are you hemming me in? You know, different ways of interpretation of that is kind of like, no, you're enclosing me. You are binding me. You are yanking me in. And it's like, wait, no, I don't want that. And so I kind of began to understood the other verses, which we didn't read, where it talks about that fearfully made, that wonderfully made. I like to stick with the wonderfully made, but I began to understand where that fear part comes in. It is very scary to be vulnerable, not just with God, but also with one another. And so knowing that there is this higher power that knows us and sees us and accepts us, sometimes, even though it's scary, to know that if the light of God is in me and in you, then there's also that aspect and that possibility that the more that I accept myself, the more that I accept God's love for me, I can also be able to be more compassionate to somebody else. And so I began to look at that way as well. And it makes me more open and more understanding of people who are a little hesitant to want to open up, because I understand now, yeah, it is a little scary to be seen by people. It's a little scary to want to be known at the same time while we're asking to be known. So I wanted to just add that to it. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is I mentioned the term and I didn't think to explain it just in case, which was Lectio Divina, which is a practice of sacred reading. And I'm going to really take this all the way down to the very basics that will probably make some Catholic priest very angry. But essentially the way I practice it is I would read a sacred scripture, and it's not always directly from the Bible. For me, it might be like a book about Buddhism, maybe, or even Quakerism, but a sacred reading, a sacred text. And I would read it. So in this case, it would be Psalm 139, 1 through 12, which is what I was sitting with. I would read it out loud and then sit with it and see what particular verse or what particular word or what particular phrase, if it's not the whole thing, that's really sitting with me. When I first did this, you hem me in behind and your hand upon, prevalent to me, because it was actually how I experienced God with my mystical experience. And then after that, you read it again for a second time, and you might actually just kind of focus in on the specific phrase that sat with you. Typically, when I sit and pray about the words, I might journal something about it so that it can register a little bit more. And then finally, I like to read it one more time, a third time. And then after that third time, I'm not trying to analyze the verse. I'm not trying to pick it apart and figure out what the context was, what was going on historically. I really just prayerfully sit with the words and just commune with God in relationship with what was revealed to me. And then finally, I usually end it with centering prayer, or I'll just say a quick prayer of thanksgiving for the time that I got to spend with God, or however we name God. I prefer the Holy One, or I might say breath. So those are my preferred names. But for the sake of making it brief, I'll say God. So that was what I wanted to add it. Thank you so much.
We have inherited a worldview that is a dichotomy. It's bifurcated, it's binary. And going back 3,000 years, Greek metaphysics would have spirit and matter. which and the Hebrew worldview didn't have that kind of antipathy. We called it in creation story. Each day, God says, and it's good. So the assumption that the material world is somehow less than the spiritual world or foreign, or our goal is to escape this fleshly existence. I think the Bible may give us critique against that. But it occurs to me today that as so-called enlightenment or post-enlightenment people, we have the sacred and the secular. Well, some of that goes back before that. You know, the Roman Church had people who were called religious, would take holy orders, and then there's the rest of us. So this secular worldview and mindset, which has aspects of saying, well, this is the real thing, because this is scientific, not other stuff. You can't prove it, so forget about that. This psalm has a very powerful antidote, I think, to that. Because in detailing the omnipresence of God, just never get away from the divine presence. To have God with you, or to have the with God life, is not a Sunday morning occasion. So I just love it that the psalmist, from all these different ways, that no, can't get away. God's with you all the time. You can't close it off and go, well, these are just my thoughts. No. that affirmation of omnipresence and unity with the divine is something that I want us to hold on to against some of the alternative worldviews.
There's a song that I like a lot, a folk song by a British songwriter called "The World Turned Upside Down." It's about the Diggers, which was a group that was around the same time as the early Quakers. I often think that the New Testament is about the world turned upside down. You know, Jesus talked about the first shall be last and the last shall be first. And my sense is that some people, what they really need most is to be made smaller. Somebody said this in our small group a few minutes ago, essentially, slightly different words. And some people need to grow larger. And I think that's one reason why this sense of being known can be both very comforting and also very terrifying. Because early Quakers often talked about being convicted. They often wrote this in their early experiences of being convincement, that they were convicted by God. And I think that's very uncomfortable. And there are times when what I most need is to be brought low or made smaller, or maybe be almost condemned for some places I've been really stuck, if I'm going to have the possibility of growing into something new. And other people absolutely need comfort in their really hard place, and to be empowered the way they haven't been empowered by the world we're in today. So just as you said, Lynette, this is a very mixed thing for different people and for different times of our life, how this being known is going to feel. But we shouldn't only yearn for the lifting up sometimes, especially those of us who have a lot too much already.
Lynette said something that touched me and us about, anything that comes between you and me, Lord, I want to get rid of that. I want to know about it and fix it. And then we were just talking about being lifted up and brought down. And it, from a recent experience of being reminded of something, or not reminded, told of something that I had done that had hurt somebody, realizing that learning about that which separates me from God is not about necessarily, could be, but not necessarily about having a dream or a vision in which God says, you need to fix this, but that we are the voice and the face of God in making things right. And it's up to us to call out when hurt is happening. It's up to us to listen when we are called out. It's up to us to encourage and support those who are suffering and feeling small. And that we can't just wait for God to do this sort of poof. It's through us that this kind of stuff happens. And that's an awesome responsibility. And it's an act of love. It's an act of love. And if we allow love to be the first motion, we can do that work, both giving and receiving.
I learn also the greatness of God, the power of God, being almighty. In verse 2, it talks of how he perceive. He perceived my thoughts from far. Verse 3 talks of discerning. He discerned my ways. Then verse 4, he talks of before a word on my tongue, before any word comes from my tongue, God completely knows And from these three words, perceiving, discerning, and knowing, I can see how great God is, His greatness. He can't be described, He can't be compared to anybody. God is so great. And I look at Him, as I internalize this verse, I look at God to be so superior, to be somebody I should have a relationship with, I should move closer to. Because if we can perceive, if we can discern, even before I think of doing it, He knows it already. Then who am I? Who am I? Other than to submit, other than to worship, other than to seek that deeper relationship with Him and surrender to Him fully.
Lynette, I want to thank you for sharing two of your practices with us. Letting these words move through your body. The words of the song being so close to some of the words in this passage. And that practice of Lectio, of returning to the words that really touch your heart that day when you read. I see so much here that if I stay with one verse, your hand shall lead me. I don't always enter fully into what I read, and it reaches my heart more swiftly and then more deeply if something comes to me through my body or through music, if I'm able to bring my senses into the words and let darkness be like light. Thank you.
Lynette, we have just about a minute left. If I wanted to make space, if there was anything you wanted to share to wrap up this portion.
Thank you, Jen. Wow. Thank you everyone for your shares. They bring me to a place where, pulling it back in, I think about the Psalms and beyond just the poetic words of 139, because there's a lot in it. It starts off with this God that is too wonderful and too wide. And then as you may be familiar with it, then it reels God in and talks about this very personal God. And then it goes into smite thee, smite the people. And then it comes back into the solidarity and unity. And as I listen to everyone essentially wrestle with these words and what they mean to us, it reminds me of what could have taken place as we write out our own Psalms. We're writing them with our words, with our thoughts, with our reflections. And it doesn't always look like this really straight line. And I think it's meant to be that way, that we are co-making this relationship and this dialogue together with God. And as we co-make this dialogue and this relationship, we continue to form new stories and new understandings. And that's how relationships evolve. And I believe that's a good thing. So I really appreciate everyone's shares as we all continue to wrestle with and sit with and dance with the passage as it grows in us, because there's so many ways to look at it. And I think that's the point.